If you have ever tried to quit smoking or cut down and found it difficult, you are not alone. Last year, 2/3 of smokers unsuccessfully attempted to quit or cut down the amount they smoke each day. Well, imagine being able to quit in just one session. Our guest today says it's possible. So thank you for tuning into the Wellness Nurse podcast, where we aim to inspire Australians to live healthier and longer lives and provide them with the tools to achieve this. My vision is that Australians will become the healthiest, longest living people in the world. My guest today, Jaime Reed, is a registered nurse of almost 30 years and a former smoker. Jaime is a director and therapist at Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking and Vaping in South Australia. Jaime understands it when people say they have found it hard to quit because she says she lost count of the times she tried to quit before succeeding with Alan Carr's method. So welcome, Jaime, to the Wellness Nurse podcast.
Thank you, Ross.
Jaime, we'll talk about Alan Carr's Easy Way method. But first, can you tell me a little bit about your professional background as a nurse and your experience as a smoker?
Yeah, well, as a nurse, like you said, I've been a nurse for almost 30 years, and a lot of my work professionally has been in the area of addiction. I started off, though, at the Royal Adelaide and was there for 7 years, and most of that time I was working in the intensive care unit. And of course, saw a lot of people who were in intensive care because of complications from smoking and other drug use. So it's a lot of people think with health professionals, they say, how can you be a smoker when you're a health professional? You know what happens to people if they smoke or do things that are unhealthy. But if you don't understand why you smoke, and as a nurse, well, as an individual and being a nurse, it didn't help me being a nurse to understand why I smoked. But I came across the Alan Carr method and stopped smoking with that, and it got me really interested in the area of addiction. After that, I went to work for Drug and Alcohol Services for 2 years in their detoxification unit, then worked for 4 years in an Aboriginal drug and alcohol program, and following that worked at the Adelaide Women's Prison on the methadone programs. I've got a fair bit of experience, and also I've worked in the Alan Carr organisation for 11 years now, so I've got quite a lot of experience in the area of addiction. And if people are interested in stopping smoking, I'm sure none of them would want to hear about stopping smoking from someone who's never smoked before, because while someone who's never smoked before, they can have a theoretical understanding of it, they don't really understand it in the same way that someone who has smoked before understands it. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I actually started smoking when I was 12, and from 13 I was a regular smoker. Being the youngest of 5 kids, there was always my brother or an older sister who I could get a cigarette from. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, there was often an adult in the house who I could nick some from, or go around to the shop in my school uniform and buy some, because that's how it was then. And it didn't take long for me to get hooked. And I remember trying to stop countless times as a teenager. I tried to stop using patches. I tried to stop using the gum. And the longest I ever managed to stop was for 3 months. And once I got to the 3-month mark of not smoking, I celebrated by having a cigarette and, of course, went back to smoking. And I know that sounds ridiculous, celebrating smoking, not smoking, by having a cigarette. And, of course, it is. But as smokers will understand, it shows the real struggle that smokers have, that part of them wants to stop smoking and another part of them thinks that they want to keep smoking. And smokers, even though they know all the reasons not to smoke, because smokers aren't stupid, smokers know all the reasons not to smoke. In fact, they know it better than non-smokers because they've experienced it. But we know all the reasons not to smoke, but smokers think that they get a benefit out of smoking. And for me, I believe that smoking helped me concentrate and deal with stress, and believing that, of course, everyone has stress in their life from day to day and have periods where they need to concentrate, whether it's at work or in different situations. So, believing that, of course, I kept smoking. And being a nurse, well, I have the perfect excuse to keep smoking because every shift I had to be able to concentrate, and many shifts were stressful. So believing that, it wasn't surprising that I kept smoking. And part of me believed that I loved it, but and even though I hated it at the same time, I hated being addicted to something, and I felt controlled by it, even though part of me thought that I loved it. And I felt like I couldn't function without the cigarettes or nicotine. And even though part of me thought that I loved the smoking, I knew it was the nicotine that I was after. And I was that addicted that when I was working at the Royal Adelaide, I would always carry Nicorette gum with me. Because on most shifts, I could get outside 2 or 3 times and get a couple of quick cigarettes in, but sometimes it was too busy. And for those days, I'd have the nicotine gum there ready because I believed that I needed the nicotine to help me function. But in early 2000, I began to read Alan Carr's book, and on the 10th of March in 2000, when I finished reading the book, I smoked my last cigarette and have been a happy non-smoker ever since. So I had 19 years of smoking and 24 years of not smoking. And it was just about changing how I saw it and really questioning what did I get out of smoking, or did I get out of nicotine the benefits that I thought I did. It just made me want to understand more about it, because people doing something to the point that they're on life support, I just wanted to know more about the area of addictions. Yeah, I did all of those other things before I was lucky enough to get into the Alan Carr organisation 11 years ago.
Well, what an incredible story. Incredible story, because you've seen the effects of it. You've worked as a health professional, so you know more than anyone the potential harm for it. But as
Yeah.
you say, the benefit that you got was you were able to concentrate, or it relieved, in one way, it relieved stress. So you continued that. And then you heard about Alan Carr's
Yeah.
method.
It was in 2000, and at the time there was a show on television called Good Medicine. I think it might have been on Channel 9. And at the time there was only one clinic in Australia, and it was in Melbourne. And they didn't say a lot about what happened in the clinic, but the person they had on the show who went into it was Frankie J. Holden from memory. So most people of a certain age will remember him. Yeah, he came out of the clinic going, "Yippee, I'm a non-smoker." And I thought, "Oh, well, this all sounds very good, but I'm in Adelaide and I'm studying, and And they said that there's a book, so I thought I'll get the book. And the funniest thing about it was, once I started reading the book, I realised that Alan didn't come from a health or science background, and he was saying that he could help everyone quit. And I'm thinking, okay, so you don't come from a health or science background, you're telling me it'll be easy to quit. And I just thought, this is just ridiculous. So I kept reading the book to have an argument with him. And yeah, exactly. Thankfully, and obviously, Alan won the argument
It
because
sounds like he won. Yes.
Yes, he did. He did. 24 years later, Alan definitely won. He definitely won, and I'm glad he did.
I'm glad
Yeah,
he
I've
did.
often said I've never been so glad to be. His explanations, even though he didn't come from a health or science background, his explanations of smoking and withdrawal actually fit with the science. So that was another thing that impressed me about the method. It was just about changing how I saw it. And that's what the method is about. Questioning, do you get the benefits out of it? Does it help you concentrate or relieve stress? And one way, without even looking at it from a health or science background, just looking at it from an everyday point of view. If you think of people who smoke, are they more relaxed than people who don't smoke? Do they perform better? And it's interesting, at the moment we've got the Olympics going, and a lot of people think that nicotine helps them perform better. But with the drug testing, I've never heard of an athlete testing positive for nicotine as a performance enhancing drug.
No. Then tell us about vaping, because sometimes vaping is seen as a healthier alternative
Yeah.
to smoking. So how do you approach that?
Basically, we look at it in questioning what does a person get out of it? What's the benefit that they get from nicotine, whether they get nicotine from tobacco or whether they get it from vaping or nicotine gum, because there's quite a lot of people who've stopped smoking, but they're still addicted to the nicotine gum. So it's the method of administration isn't the issue. It's the drug that's the issue. And I use the word drug in the medical sense of the word, not in the legal sense of the word, which is putting it very basically, a drug is any substance apart from food and water that when you put it into the body changes how the body works. So, and nicotine's a drug, just like blood pressure medications are, or diabetes medication, or heroin. They're drugs. So, and if someone takes a drug, whether it's a medicine or whether it's an illicit drug, I think what's really important is to question what do they get out of it that someone who doesn't have it misses out on, which is basically what the method is about. It's, questioning what, whether a person's a vapor or a smoker, what's the benefit that they get from it that someone who doesn't smoke or vape misses out on.
So, Jaime, can you explain briefly why people often struggle to give up smoking using traditional methods?
Yeah. Often it's a lack of information, and that can be in a range of areas. And it can be from the approach of the method, because a lot of the methods that people have probably tried, whether it's medications, whether it's using nicotine replacement, or just going cold turkey without really having a full understanding of why they've smoked and why they've been tricked into thinking that they get a benefit from smoking in the past. A lot of people, when they in these situations, they'll focus, when they try and stop, they'll focus on all the reasons why they shouldn't smoke, and they'll usually concentrate on the health and financial reasons to try and quit. And it seems to make sense to do that. But there's a very logical reason why focusing on the negative effects of smoking doesn't help smokers to quit. And that's because the negative effects of smoking aren't the reasons why people smoke. So people need to actually understand why they do smoke. And one of the things that people struggle with, a lot of people don't really understand nicotine withdrawal that well. A lot of people, if you ask them how often they've experienced nicotine withdrawal, a lot of people will say that they've experienced nicotine withdrawal the number of times that they've tried to quit. But as smokers, some of the people listening to the podcast will probably be surprised to realise that as a smoker or a vapor, they've experienced nicotine withdrawal every day, because every drug, when you put it into the body, is broken down by the body and it's withdrawn from the body. And if that wasn't the case, you'd only have to take your aspirin once, you'd only have to take your blood pressure medication once. Every drug, when you take it into the body, is broken down and withdrawn. But as a general rule, it's drugs of addiction that cause withdrawal symptoms. And a lot of people, smokers, don't know that when they put nicotine into the body, when they have a cigarette or a vape, once they put that cigarette out or put the vape down, within 2 hours, half of that nicotine's gone. So nicotine leaves the body really quickly. So smokers actually experience nicotine withdrawal every day. But it's a physiological process. It's a physical process. You put the drug in, it goes around the blood, the liver breaks it down and it's withdrawn. And the withdrawal symptoms are so slight with nicotine, most of the time people don't even realise that they're experiencing them. They just feel this sort of little bit of tension, a bit of an empty, insecure feeling, that feeling of I want a cigarette. And they think that, they're just wanting or craving a cigarette. They have the cigarette, they temporarily leave the withdrawals that most of the time they're not even consciously aware that they're experiencing. And because those withdrawals seem almost, identical to everyday stress, once the withdrawal symptoms are relieved temporarily, the smoker thinks, and I did exactly the same, the smoker thinks, oh, that made the stress a bit easier to handle, that made it reduce. But the smoker doesn't even realise that they're withdrawing often. And so in that scenario, and it happens in so many different ways, the cigarette falsely gets the credit for the positive in the situation, but the previous cigarette doesn't get the blame for creating the problem. And so if a smoker doesn't actually realise how often they've experienced withdrawal symptoms and don't realise that they experience it every day as a smoker, and only think that they experience withdrawal symptoms when they try to quit, that shows that when they try and quit and then they feel awful, the discomfort in stopping smoking is not the physical aspect of it, because smokers have experienced the physical aspect of withdrawal every single day. If it was the physical aspect of withdrawal was really awful and distressing, smokers would be woken from their sleep. But they don't, they sleep right through. But so when they try and quit and they feel really unsettled, and I experienced that plenty of times myself before I read the book. People misinterpret that often as being the drug leaving the body or not having the drug, and that, the body was wanting to have the nicotine. And that's a physical aspect of withdrawal, but it's not. It's the mental side, the believing that you're missing out. And then if someone believes that they're missing out, the thing is, well, as smokers, what are we missing out on that non-smokers, when we try and quit, what are we missing out on when we try and quit that non-smokers have been missing out all the time?
It's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's sort of shifting the perspective, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So it's not about willpower. How does Alan Carr's method see this differently?
Well, if a person believes that they're missing out, yes, I'll definitely need to use willpower, because all of those times I tried to stop with patches and gum and, cold turkey, I believed that I was missing out. So those times that I tried to stop, and that time that I lasted the whole 3 months, I was definitely using willpower, because I believed that I was missing out by not smoking. With the Alan Carr method, when you check and reality test all the benefits that you think that you're getting out of it, like, does smoking help with concentration? Does smoking help with stress relief, boredom relief? Do we smoke because it's something to do with our hands? Does it help in social situations, etc., etc.? All the benefits that a person thinks that they might get out of smoking, if those perceptions are changed and reality tested, and you realise that you don't actually get out of smoking the benefits that you thought you did, you don't have to use willpower to deprive yourself of something that you don't see as a benefit.
Mm. So how do we challenge those perceptions when people really do think that it is relieving their stress, for instance? How do we challenge that?
It's doing it slowly in a session, because a session takes 6 hours, and it's, in a way, and it can seem like a long time, 6 hours, but if you think about how long smokers have seen smoking in a particular way, it's like literally decades. And so to have a small number of hours with the Alan Carr method, whether it's attending a session, reading the book, or listening to an audio book, whatever way a person accesses the method, it's really a small number of hours turning around decades of thinking. And one of the things that helped for me was, as I said earlier, I didn't believe that the method would work. And I know I said that I kept reading the book to have an argument with Alan, which I did. And so every situation that he described that involved smoking, I was looking at all the different aspects that were involved in that situation, and working out what should get the credit for the positives in that situation and what should get the blame for the negatives. It's like, smokers will say, if you ask smokers what some of their favourite cigarettes are, they'll always say that first one in the morning. And if you ask a smoker what do they enjoy and what's the benefit that they get out of it that a non-smoker misses out on, and you ask them to describe it, say something like, I like getting up in the morning when the house is quiet. I sit out in the garden for a while. The house is nice and quiet before all the kids get up. I have a cup of tea, cup of coffee. I get my head organised for the day. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's everything that you've just mentioned a non-smoker can do. What feels physically good in your body, because smoking is a physical process. What feels physically good in your body that you get out of smoking that a non-smoker misses out on? And they can't actually say. And when I was arguing with Alan, I couldn't come up with anything either. So again, it's like, and sometimes in social situations, people will say, I like having a cigarette in social situations. And it's like, well, okay, what do you get out of that the non-smoker misses out on? They say, yeah, I'm with friends, we're talking. And again, it's, non-smokers can have all of those things. And they'll say that they enjoy a cigarette in social occasions. But then if you ask the people that you enjoy the cigarettes with, what if they're non-smokers? Would you still enjoy that? And it's like, no, they only think that they enjoy the cigarettes with smokers, because if they're with non-smokers, they feel like they're being judged. And it's working out what should get the credit for the positives and what should get the blame for the negatives.
When you're looking at it in context, it's really the context that is providing the benefit rather than the cigarette itself or the nicotine itself.
Yeah, there's plenty of benefits in the context that people say that they enjoy, like the ones with social occasions or whatever. But I think another thing is to be mindful of is when smokers smoke, they do feel a bit better than the moment before. They lit up. They do. Yeah. And you're looking surprised.
Okay.
And yeah, but the thing
Tell
is,
us more about that.
yep. So smokers feel a bit better than the moment after they light up, they feel a bit better than the moment before. But the thing is to compare themselves to a non-smoker in an identical situation.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's like they feel a bit better than the moment before, but once they've lit up, yeah, what have they done? They've temporarily relieved the withdrawal symptoms that they weren't aware that they were
Mm.
experiencing, and they've probably temporarily shut up the
Mm.
argument that they had going on in their head, want one, shouldn't have one, want one, shouldn't have one. So they feel a bit better in that
Yeah.
way. They've temporarily relieved the withdrawal symptoms, but comparing that to a non-smoker, the non-smoker didn't have those withdrawal symptoms and didn't have the argument going on in their head, want one, shouldn't have one, want one, shouldn't have one.
Mm. Mm. So they're responding to those withdrawal symptoms that they don't know they're having,
Yeah.
and they're experiencing a psychological benefit because they've stopped the chatter in their head that says, will I, won't I?
I wouldn't say it was a psychological benefit. I'd say it's a psychological relief.
Okay. Yep.
And if you
Mm.
think about the word relief, by definition, for anything to give you relief, you have to feel
Yes.
discomfort first, whether
To
it's,
begin with.
yeah. And the discomfort that smokers experience from smoking, non-smokers don't have.
It is a different approach altogether, isn't
Oh,
it?
definitely.
So, what about the benefit of using nicotine replacement therapies as you're getting used to this idea and during the process of starting to think differently about cigarettes? Would it be beneficial to still just have a patch maybe, or be chewing on the gum
No.
whilst you're having that
Yeah, I mean,
conversation with yourself?
the interesting thing about the Alan Carr method is Alan said, keep smoking while you're quitting,
Mm.
like whether you're reading the book or in the session, and we have cigarette breaks in the session until the last cigarette near the end of the session. And it's really important. That's a really important part of the process, because one of the things is important in stopping and questioning, do you get a benefit, is being consciously aware of what smoking or vaping feels like. Most people smoke and vape totally, almost subconsciously, or without even being aware of or taking notice of the feeling. And it's really interesting if people listening to the podcast, if they smoke or vape, I'd ask them to, over the next few days, try not to do anything else while they're smoking, like not be on the phone, not be having a cup of coffee, not be talking to someone in the house, or, patting the dog or whatever. Just be really
Mm.
aware of how you feel before you have the cigarette, while you're having it, and question what feels physically good in your body that a non-smoker misses out on. And people really
Mm.
struggle to identify what feels physically good, which is surprising because as smokers, we've had literally thousands of cigarettes, so why can't we describe it in detail? Things that are positive, that feel good about it, if there is something good about it.
Mm.
I mean, anything that's a physical process, we can, or with plenty of other things, whether it's eating food, we can describe in detail what feels good about it. But
Mm.
with smoking, can we do it? I certainly couldn't I couldn't
Mm.
come up with anything positive when I was reading the book.
There is, however, a physiological benefit, isn't there? And I'm only challenging this
That's all
because,
right.
um, of the science behind it. So,
Yeah.
is there any dopamine, for instance, that is released when
Yeah,
people smoke? Okay, there
there
is.
is. There is.
Okay,
And,
interesting.
you'll hear that when, when you're reading some things on smoking, that's one of the reasons why people smoke. And it is one of the reasons why smokers get tricked into thinking that there's a benefit. When people light up, if someone lights up a cigarette, they inhale the smoke. Within less than 10 seconds, nicotine reaches the brain. And when it does, dopamine is released. And people might think, well, if dopamine is released in the brain when we smoke, isn't that a benefit? Um, and it seems in some ways, it seems to the smoker that there is, but they've actually done research where they found that people who smoke, their baseline dopamine level comes down. And so they'll start up here, their baseline dopamine level is there as a non-smoker, and once they start smoking, it comes down slowly, because it happens. All of this happens very gradually, so smokers aren't actually aware of what's happening. And then when they have a cigarette, it goes up. Have another cigarette, goes up. But what they don't realise is, as a non-smoker, they'd be up here. So yes, they do feel a bit better than the moment before, but they don't feel better than a non-smoker who's up here and where they were before they started smoking. And when people stop smoking, their baseline dopamine level comes up. And it's,
Yes.
A number of things will cause people to have their dopamine levels increase, whether it's exercise, whether it's positive social interaction, whether it's food, whether it's sex or learning something. And if you think about all of those things, they're all things that are geared towards survival. And that's why one of the reasons why the brain is tricked into thinking, when they get a little increase of dopamine, that they should keep doing it and that they need to do it.
Our clever brains, they trick us, and it's not always to our advantage. Yeah.
And I think I know a lot of smokers see themselves as the problem that needs to be fixed with the nicotine. It's the other way around. Smokers falsely give the credit to the cigarette for the positives in a situation, but don't actually blame the cigarette or the nicotine for creating the problem. And if
we do all we can to justify our behaviour, really, as humans, don't we? Yeah. And it's not always to our long-term benefit.
Definitely not. I mean, with other things that we do to try and make us feel better, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel better, but the thing is questioning, does it actually make us feel better in the long run? Some people might get into a bit of junk food, and I'm quite partial to a bit of takeaway and whatnot. But at least with that, there's some positives that you can identify. Yeah, it can taste good. The convenience is good. Someone, and that's something that they can want or crave. But do they crave the 1,000 calories that go with it or the feeling stodgy afterwards? So, the thing is
that's right.
Work out with smoking, what are people actually craving?
I'm really interested in the logistics of an Alan Carr session, what it actually looks like. You've mentioned that it's a 6-hour session.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining, you're saying it is possible for somebody to walk into a session as a smoker and walk out of a session as a non-smoker.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what happens exactly during those sessions that is so transformative?
It's actually looking at smoking and all of the cigarettes that we've had as smokers and questioning what did we get out of it that a non-smoker misses out on. And it's questioning that and questioning the brainwashing that we've been brainwashed with since birth. Like every time you see a film where someone's about to be executed, what's a person's last request? Or, films from the olden days where there'll be an expectant father outside the maternity ward, chain smoking, and then once a baby's born and everything's okay, cigars are passed around. And like we've been subjected to seeing smoking in a particular way, literally for decades. And it's questioning that. It's like looking at ourselves and looking at non-smokers. How are we better off than the non-smokers? And questioning that brainwashing. Like when we look at this cigarettes that people see as special, often people say the one after a meal. But if you think about the cigarettes after a meal, people who are smoking, who are smokers who are listening, look back over your smoking life. Can you remember when you've actually enjoyed those cigarettes? Can you, if they're so special, can you remember that one on, I don't know, March 25th or April 4th? What was that? Was that a good one? But we can, as smokers, we can definitely remember meals that were spoiled because we were in a situation where we couldn't smoke, or, we can remember plenty of times when a cigarette tasted especially foul. But when can we actually remember individual cigarettes and we can go, oh, yep, that was a good one?
Not often, I'm guessing.
No. There's plenty of times we can remember the relief of shutting up the argument, what one can't have one, what one can't have one. But do we actually physically enjoy it? And it's like, if you think about food, if something's really if there's some really nice food, we can remember savouring it. A really good meal, we can remember who we were, we remember what we were eating, we remember who we were with. because that's genuinely special. But the cigarette, can we actually remember that?
Success stories can be powerful motivators. What's the most inspiring transformation you've witnessed through this program?
It's tricky. It's different. Well, how do you measure inspiring, or how do you assess inspiring? I think in terms of, well, in my own situation, I didn't expect it to work. I was that skeptical about it. As I said, I was having an argument with Alan as I was reading the book. And once I got to the end of the book, I couldn't imagine a situation where a cigarette would ever make anything better, but I just thought, I just can't believe that it will work. So when he said, smoke your last cigarette, I did. And when he said, chuck them out, I didn't, because I thought, I just can't imagine that I can smoke for 19 years and find it easy to quit. But I just never had an urge to smoke again, it was almost, some people are like quite almost, well, euphoric, and some people actually are euphoric. For me, it was almost just like a non-event. I just didn't smoke anymore. But then there's other people, like there's one person I did a session for, and she was a woman in her 50s, and she had quite significant anxiety, and she attended with her sister, and she was from rural South Australia, and I was really worried about it working for her, because I was worried that whether or not she'd take on the information, experiencing the anxiety, but she stopped, no problem. Yeah, and another guy, this is a very extra positive one. When towards the end of the session, he said to me, "Oh, I can't wait to feel the withdrawal symptoms, because that's how I know that the nicotine's leaving my body, and I'm stopping smoking." And he used a few bit more colourful words than that as well, but I'll just give you the not so colourful version of it. Yeah, he said, "I can't wait to feel these withdrawal symptoms, because I know it'll be the last time I'll ever have them. And I know that my addiction is dying. The addiction, or the belief that I need the nicotine, is dying." And I spoke with him a couple of weeks later, and he almost sounded disappointed. And that wasn't because he didn't stop. He did stop, but he said wasn't aware of feeling the withdrawal symptoms, and he wanted to. And that was an
That's
interesting thing.
extraordinary. That's really extraordinary that he didn't feel them.
Well, I didn't either. And the way I make sense of that is it's the physical side and the mental side, because and this will probably make a lot of sense to people. As I said, as smokers, we experience withdrawal every day. We put the drug in, it comes out, and then we top it up, it comes out. So withdrawal is a process that happens regardless, and most of the time we're not even consciously aware of it. But when we stop, we believe that we're missing out. So we have all of this mental stuff on top of that building up, and that creates stress and puts stress into our body when we're withdrawing, on top of the withdrawal.
And
So
you've removed that fear of missing out.
exactly. And that's what it's about. And that's why it's essential for people to keep smoking while they're stopping, to really test, what's the benefit? Does it taste good? Does it smell good? Is it because I like the feeling of smoke hitting my lungs? Is it because it's something to do with my hands? Does it relieve boredom? Etc., etc., etc. So it's really reality testing it. What are we, as smokers and vapors, what are we enjoying? Yes. I mean, I remember times when I was 13 and 14 trying to quit and feeling really stressed. Once I got to the end of the book and stopped, I don't even remember experiencing withdrawal symptoms. And the way I'll make sense out of that is because when I knew that I wasn't missing out on anything, I didn't build up all of this stress in my head and put that on top of the withdrawal. And when, as a smoker, if you're walking down the street, no one's going to be looking at you going, "Oh yeah, I reckon it's 3 hours since I've had one." So there's a physical side. There is a physical element to it, but most of smoking and knowing how to stop and find it easy is the mental side. And another classic example of that is people who are on a long haul flight. They're fine. They haven't had a cigarette. Just say if they're going from Australia to London, they haven't had a cigarette for 13, 14, or maybe they haven't got the no-stop flights now. So I think that they're about 19 hours, I think, and they haven't had a cigarette for a while. Well, for all of that time, obviously, and they're going fine. But the minute they get off that plane, where are they rushing? To the smoking room. They want to get through customs, get through immigration. They want to get to the smoking area.
So they haven't felt that withdrawal during the flight.
Well, they might have felt it as a little bit of tension, but they haven't even interpreted it as withdrawal. because if it's not significant enough to actually see it for what it is for withdrawal. Like if people have a high tolerance to alcohol and they go into alcohol withdrawal, they know what it is. But because nicotine withdrawal feels basically identical to everyday stress, they interpret the withdrawal symptoms as everyday stress. And then when they have a cigarette, they get out of the plane, then they say, oh, that helped me with everyday stress.
It
Did
starts
it?
again.
Yeah. The stress hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed for that period is they temporarily leave the withdrawal symptoms and temporarily shut up the argument in their head. One can't have one can't have one.
Listeners would be feeling a little bit of hope right now because you are describing a method that is quite different and an understanding that could actually shift entirely a person's belief about smoking. So what would you say to somebody who has tried everything else? He's listened to what you have said, but might still be hesitant.
I'd say check out our website.
Okay.
And there's more information on there, and that's at www.alancarr.com.au, and that's Alan spelled Allen and Carr Carr. There's plenty of information there, and we have sessions that are run in most capital cities. Occasionally we'll do one in Tasmania and the Northern Territory, but they're more regularly in Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane and Perth. So, yeah, there's sessions, and the sessions come with a 3-month money-back guarantee. And the way that works is if someone attends a session, often that's all people need, but sometimes people need a bit more information or a bit more time to process things. And so if they haven't stopped smoking after the first session or they stop for a while and then start up again, there are 2 booster sessions that are included in the price. And so the first session, that goes for around 6 hours, and the booster sessions, they go for around 3.5 hours. And so if someone's done a main session plus 2 booster sessions in 3 months, in a 3-month period, so from the first session in 3 months, if they're still smoking after the 3 months, there's a full money-back guarantee.
And Jaime, what about, we've got some people who are living in remote Australia or who can't get to the capital cities so easily. What might be available for them?
The course is actually, or the seminars are held online, and it's the same content and it's just as effective, but it means people don't have to travel. So they're interactive sessions, so there's plenty of chances to ask any questions that people have, and it has the same success rate. So if people wanted to, if they were in, I don't know, Alice Springs or Burnie in Tasmania, it's just a matter of logging on. Go to the website, www.alancarr.com.au, and there's information on sessions, and they're run pretty well every week or every 10 days or so. So there's, doesn't matter where you are, whether in your capital city or even in remote or regional areas. There's the website. And do the seminar through the website on Zoom, and it's quite easy. You just click on the link. You don't have to be very tech savvy to be able to do the sessions. But there's also the book. You could go online and buy the book online, and if people aren't big at reading or if they prefer to listen, there's an audio book. And I'm sure most libraries have got copies of the book as well. So I know money's tight for a lot of people, and particularly for smokers, because smoking isn't cheap and vaping isn't cheap. So, there's, check out your library, check out the book or check out the seminars. And if people get the book and they've got questions, they can ring the number and we talk through the questions with.
It's terrific, Jaime. So there's a lot of different options depending on your budget. Thank you so much for sharing all of your valuable insights and your personal experiences. Say the phone number. Yes, what's the phone number?
And if people want to have any questions about the method around smoking or vaping, the number's 1300 848 028.
That's brilliant.
1300 848 028.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes along with the website. And just thank you again. It brings hope to people who are struggling to quit. And Yeah, your journey serves as a beacon of hope as well, and I wish you continued success in your mission to help others
Thanks,
achieve a
Roz.
smoke-free life. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Roz. Cheers.